Latest messages from Sacramento indicated all beaches could be closed in the state.
13 square miles and beaches could be closed for weeks, maybe months.
The discovery unfolded in the waters off California when marine researchers detected vast sinkholes forming beneath the ocean floor. These immense cavities were not the kind of shallow depressions usually associated with minor seabed shifts. They were gaping, abyss-like structures, stretching across sections of the seabed with startling depth and scale. The scientists who mapped them with sonar and submersible drones described them as voids that seemed to swallow the ocean floor itself, as though great swaths of earth had been scooped away in silence beneath the waves. Their sudden appearance sent shockwaves through scientific communities and prompted immediate intervention by U.S. authorities, who moved swiftly to shut down affected stretches of California's coastal waters. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The sinkholes presented more than just geological curiosity. They carried the potential to destabilize entire marine ecosystems, threatening species that depend on the delicate balance of the seabed. The ocean floor in these regions is not just mud and sand. It is a living structure built up over centuries, woven with corals, kelp forests, microbial mats, and the roots of seagrass meadows that anchor countless organisms. When the ground beneath collapses into yawning voids, habitats vanish overnight. Colonies of fish lose breeding grounds, shellfish beds crumble, and migratory routes that rely on predictable currents and seafloor topography become disrupted. It was this ecological domino effect that raised alarms just as much as the physical hazard. For coastal communities in California, the sinkholes struck a deeper nerve. The state's economy leans heavily on fishing, tourism, and marine research, all of which are intimately tied to the stability of the ocean. Charter boats, research vessels, and coastal fisheries suddenly faced exclusion zones as federal orders mandated that no civilian craft approach regions where these sinkholes were mapped. Even for communities not directly reliant on the sea, the closure sparked a ripple effect. Harbors lost traffic, seafood suppliers anticipated shortages, and the flow of visitors to popular beach towns began to thin under the shadow of warnings about unstable ocean floors. What unsettled many was not just the closure, but the idea that something vast and uncontrollable was shifting in the unseen world just offshore. The mechanics of these sinkholes baffled even experienced geologists. Traditional sinkholes on land form when soluble rock dissolves and underground caverns collapse. In the ocean, however, the process can be even more complex. Some researchers suggested methane hydrates trapped beneath the seabed could have destabilized, melting into gas and leaving behind pockets of emptiness that collapsed under the pressure of overlying sediments. Others proposed tectonic faulting, with seismic strains pulling open voids and dragging the seabed down in slabs. Each theory carried unsettling implications. If methane hydrate destabilization were to blame, that hinted at deeper issues tied to warming waters and climate stress. If tectonic movement was the culprit, the sinkholes could foreshadow larger seismic or volcanic upheavals yet to unfold along California's volatile coast. The military's presence intensified speculation. Reports of naval surveillance vessels and drone subs patrolling the closed-off regions suggested more than routine safety measures. Some believed that if the sinkholes were linked to methane release, there could be a risk of explosive outgassing or even tsunamigenic events should the seabed rupture on a larger scale. Others pointed to the possibility of structural collapse spreading along continental shelf edges, raising the specter of submarine landslides that could trigger massive waves. While scientists issued careful, measured statements, the abruptness of the shutdown signaled to the public that the government viewed the discoveries as more than academic. The silence of the ocean floor had been broken by an event that demanded caution on a national scale. As images from submersibles were reviewed, the scale of the sinkholes came into focus. Some stretched hundreds of feet across, plunging deep into the darkness where sonar beams could barely register their bottom. The walls were jagged, lined with freshly exposed sediment layers, as though the ocean had torn open its own history. In some places, vents appeared along their edges, emitting faint streams of gas bubbles rising like spectral trails toward the surface. Such imagery unsettled even hardened researchers. The ocean, vast and ancient, usually shifts with patience, reshaping over millennia. To see such dramatic scars torn in real time suggested forces operating with a speed and violence that few expected. California's proximity to the Pacific Ring of Fire added another layer of tension. The state already lives under the looming threat of earthquakes and tectonic strain. With the discovery of these oceanic sinkholes, questions emerged about whether the seafloor collapse was tied to stresses building in the Earth's crust. The ocean, after all, is not a separate realm but part of the same restless geology that shapes mountains, rifts, and volcanoes. If these sinkholes were early signs of broader instability, they might serve as precursors to events on shore, linking the fate of the ocean to that of the land. This possibility underscored why authorities moved so decisively, treating the phenomenon as a national security matter rather than a localized hazard. Researchers working near the sinkholes reported strange acoustic anomalies. Instruments recorded low-frequency vibrations, deep groans emanating from the earth below. Some described it as the seabed breathing, a rhythmic pulse that defied simple explanation. While the data remained under review, the eerie suggestion that the ocean floor itself was in motion added a surreal dimension to the scientific puzzle. These sounds reverberated through the water, confusing marine life accustomed to steady environmental cues. Pods of dolphins and whales were observed altering migration paths, their sonar clicks echoing in unusual patterns as though reacting to the disturbances below. The collapse was no longer only geological, it was biological, cascading through layers of ocean life. The implications for scientific research were profound. California has long been a hub of oceanographic study, with universities and institutes conducting cutting-edge explorations of marine biology, geology, and climate dynamics. The sudden emergence of vast sinkholes transformed the seafloor into both a danger zone and a research goldmine. Instruments had to be recalibrated, expeditions rerouted, and theories rewritten. The sinkholes represented not only a threat, but also an unparalleled opportunity to peer into Earth systems in flux. Yet the access restrictions meant that much of this potential remained on hold, controlled under strict oversight until risks could be assessed. The scientific hunger to investigate clashed with the governmental instinct to contain. For ordinary people along the coast, the phenomenon stirred both fascination and unease. Residents watched naval vessels on the horizon and speculated about what was happening beneath the waves. Fishermen spoke of strange currents tugging at nets and unusual silences where once schools of fish had thrived. Tourists lingered on piers, staring out to sea, their imaginations fueled by rumors of bottomless pits and collapsing seabeds. The ocean, once a familiar backdrop to daily life, became a frontier of mystery and menace. The sinkholes had transformed the coastline into a place where the known met the unknown, where the everyday rhythms of tide and surf now masked unseen voids below. As more data poured in, patterns began to emerge. The sinkholes appeared clustered in regions where underwater ridges and sediment basins intersected, suggesting weaknesses in geological layering. Some areas showed signs of progressive collapse, where small voids widened over time, merging into sprawling chasms. This incremental process raised the specter of expansion, of one sinkhole triggering another in a chain reaction across the seafloor. The scale of potential change was staggering. If the ocean floor continued to crumble, it could reshape currents, alter ecosystems, and even modify coastal geography itself. The seabed is not static. It is the foundation of the marine world, and when it shifts, the consequences ripple outward through ocean and land alike. The closure of California's waters underscored a sobering truth. Humanity's dominion over the Earth is partial, contingent, and fragile. Technology allows us to map, model, and monitor, but the planet continues to act on scales that dwarf our preparations. The sinkholes reminded everyone that beneath the calm surface of the Pacific lies a dynamic, often violent geology that cares little for human schedules or economies. The researchers who first saw the sonar images grasped this immediately. What they had uncovered was not merely a feature of the seafloor, but a reminder of the ocean's hidden power, a silent force capable of reshaping coastlines and lives. Even as the sinkholes remain under study, their discovery has already carved a place in the history of ocean science. They stand as symbols of the Earth's unpredictable depths, where forces converge in darkness, unseen until they erupt into human awareness. The shutdown of California's waters may pass, restrictions may lift. But the knowledge that vast, terrifying voids can open beneath the ocean floor will linger. It marks a new chapter in humanity's relationship with the sea, one in which curiosity and caution must walk together. For the people of California, the event has transformed the coastline from a place of leisure into a frontier of awe and vigilance. The ocean, timeless and immense, has reminded us once again that it holds mysteries we are only beginning to grasp. The phenomenon that unfolded off California's coast did more than mark a geological anomaly. It forced humanity to confront the deep and often unsettling reality of how little we know about the planet beneath our feet and the oceans that surround us. Each revelation about the sinkholes peeled back layers of assumption about the supposed stability of the seabed, transforming familiar coastal waters into an active stage for forces that operate far beyond human control. The more scientists probed these dark cavities, the more questions emerged, and those questions touched on subjects ranging from planetary evolution to the survival of life itself in extreme conditions. Exploration of the cavities themselves revealed astonishing details. When submersibles descended into the darkness, they found walls etched with strange striations, as though currents and mineral flows had sculpted them like giant amphitheaters. In certain places, crystal formations glimmered faintly under the artificial lights, hinting at the mineral wealth locked within these collapsed chambers. Microbial samples taken from the sinkhole walls showed colonies of extremophiles thriving in conditions of pressure and chemical flux that would obliterate most known organisms. These microbial communities were of particular interest to astrobiologists, who saw them as potential analogs for life that might exist in the sub-ice oceans of distant moons like Europa or Enceladus. Thus, what at first appeared to be a regional geological crisis soon opened a window onto universal questions about life's persistence in the harshest environments. The psychological impact on coastal communities cannot be overstated. California has long cultivated an image of harmony with the ocean. Surf culture, fishing traditions, and oceanside tourism are woven into its identity. The sudden revelation of vast sinkholes transformed that relationship almost overnight. Beaches that once symbolized carefree recreation became vantage points for anxious stares toward the horizon. Locals whispered about the unseen voids beneath the waves, some likening them to portals into a hidden world. While scientists approached the phenomenon with analytical rigor, the public often turned to folklore and imagination, interpreting the sinkholes as signs, warnings, or even gateways to deeper mysteries. This duality, scientific exploration on one hand, cultural myth-making on the other, created a complex social fabric around the unfolding events. Economically, the shutdown of California's waters rippled into unexpected sectors. Global shipping routes, which pass along the Pacific coast, faced increased scrutiny. Even though the sinkholes themselves were offshore and localized, insurers began recalculating risk models for vessels moving through the region. The fear was not that ships would directly encounter sinkholes, but that sudden seabed collapses could trigger underwater landslides, altering currents or generating waves capable of destabilizing cargo carriers. Ports adjusted schedules, shipping companies rerouted vessels, and the cost of goods edged upward in subtle but measurable ways. Thus, what began as a geological discovery quickly infiltrated the veins of global commerce, proving once more that natural events in one region can have cascading economic consequences far beyond their point of origin. In academic circles, the sinkholes ignited a rush of theorizing. Oceanographers debated whether climate change had accelerated processes beneath the seabed. As ocean temperatures rise, methane hydrates locked within sediments become unstable, transforming into gas that seeps upward and leaves behind caverns. If this mechanism was confirmed, then the sinkholes were not isolated freaks of geology, but harbingers of what warming oceans could bring worldwide. This perspective reframed the event from a California-specific issue to a global warning, suggesting that similar collapses might occur in other continental shelves where hydrates lie in abundance. The stakes of this hypothesis were enormous, as widespread destabilization of the seabed could unleash vast amounts of greenhouse gases, amplifying climate feedback loops and complicating mitigation strategies already underway. Another angle of concern arose from the possibility of biological chain reactions. Sinkholes that gulped down habitats threatened not only immediate species but entire ecological networks. For instance, If certain fish lost spawning grounds, their populations could decline sharply, which in turn would affect predators dependent on them. Coral fragments buried in sudden collapses would erase centuries of slow growth, stripping away nurseries for countless smaller organisms. The ocean operates in interdependent webs, and the sudden removal of foundational structures risks unraveling threads across the food chain. Marine biologists monitoring the area noted shifts in migratory patterns, suggesting that species were already responding to the altered seafloor. Whether these shifts were temporary adaptations or signs of permanent reorganization remained unknown, but the urgency of long-term monitoring became undeniable. For policymakers, the sinkholes presented an unprecedented dilemma. Closing down parts of California's coast was necessary for immediate safety, but it raised thorny questions about precedent. If sinkholes could appear suddenly and without warning, should governments prepare to restrict other coastal waters preemptively? Should there be international treaties governing response to submarine collapses, given their potential to trigger tsunamis or disrupt global climate balances? The ocean is shared by all nations, yet crises often begin in localized zones. California's sinkholes therefore became not only a domestic issue, but also a test case for how the world might respond collectively to oceanic instability in the future. The presence of military forces in the region fed another layer of speculation. Beyond safety, some suspected that strategic interests were at play. Oceanic sinkholes might expose or endanger undersea communication cables, critical arteries of global internet traffic. If collapses threatened to snap these lines, the consequences would extend far beyond ecology or shipping into the very infrastructure of modern communication. Securing and rerouting these cables would require coordination on an international scale, and the involvement of naval resources suddenly appeared more understandable. The ocean floor is not just wilderness. It is also the stage for hidden networks that sustain contemporary life. Sinkholes threatening those networks transformed a geological event into a geopolitical concern. Public fascination with the sinkholes grew as images circulated of gaping voids lit by the beams of submersibles. These visuals carried an eerie, otherworldly beauty, drawing attention from artists, filmmakers, and writers who saw in them metaphors for human fragility and the vastness of the unknown. Documentaries were quickly planned, and speculative fiction began weaving the sinkholes into narratives of catastrophe and discovery. This cultural response underscored the event's place in the collective imagination. It was not only a scientific puzzle, but also a story about the tension between human knowledge and the ocean's inscrutable depths. By embedding themselves into art and storytelling, the sinkholes transcended their geological origin and became part of humanity's symbolic landscape. Meanwhile, the technical challenges of studying the sinkholes tested the limits of marine engineering. Deploying submersibles into collapsing voids required precision navigation and reinforced hulls capable of withstanding shifting pressures. Drones were fitted with advanced sonar to map contours in real time, sending streams of data back to surface vessels. Yet even these machines faced hazards, with some reports of drones disappearing into unstable zones, their signals vanishing into the abyss. Recovering data became a high-stakes endeavor, each successful mission yielding fragments of understanding while underscoring the dangers of probing too close to geological instability. These operations highlighted the bravery of researchers and engineers who risked equipment, and in some cases, their lives to explore the phenomenon. One unexpected byproduct of the event was the renewed interest in deep-sea mining. The sinkholes exposed mineral veins and rare earth elements typically buried deep beneath sediments. Although the immediate focus was on safety and research, corporations quietly noted the potential opportunities. If sinkholes could expose valuable resources, debates over whether to exploit them were sure to follow. This raised ethical dilemmas. Should humanity risk destabilizing an already fragile seabed for profit, or should these newfound windows into Earth's depths be preserved exclusively for science? The clash between commercial ambition and ecological responsibility loomed on the horizon, another layer of complexity born from the sinkhole discovery. Philosophically, the sinkholes touched on questions of human humility in the face of nature. For centuries, the sea has been a metaphor for mystery, depth, and power. But modern technology has given humanity a sense of mastery over even the most remote corners of the planet. The sudden collapse of the ocean floor shattered that illusion. It reminded us that the Earth is not a static backdrop for human activity, but an active, dynamic system with its own rhythms and cataclysms. The sinkholes stood as monuments to the limits of control, forcing societies to reconsider their place within the planetary system. They urged reflection on whether humanity should continue to press ever deeper into the ocean, or learn to accept that some mysteries are best observed from a respectful distance. As weeks turned into months, the sinkholes continued to evolve. Some widened, merging with neighboring voids, while others appeared to stabilize. Patterns of sediment slippage and water circulation carved new features into the seabed, turning static maps into outdated relics almost as soon as they were drawn. This dynamism meant that the phenomenon was not a single event, but an unfolding process, a living transformation of the Earth's crust. Observers realized they were witnessing not a finished disaster, but an ongoing chapter in geological history. Each sonar scan added new layers to the story. Each dive into the abyss deepened the sense that California's coast had become the stage for a planetary drama still in motion. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on California's shutdown after terrifying sinkholes were just discovered? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.